Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. This is sort of part two of what turned out to be quite a long session. Just the sheer number of plants basically all being done at once. I always go along the grounds, if you're going to make a mess, get everything done at once, and then you've only got one mess to clear up. You come back and make another one the next day. Right, I thought just to go over the media that I've got. Now other people may have other sorts. This is shiny new. I've only just got this, haven't used it before. I've just started thinking about using it. This is Cocoa Chunks. It's still got some fibre in it. This was a medium grade, which does mean there is a few larger parts in, but it breaks easily. Yeah, so that's the coconut chunks. You can just get the fibre on its own, which some people swear by. It's better soaked before you use it, because once you get it in a pot it can be a bit difficult to wet. I prefer to pot with dry media, and I've just thought about that. I could have potted with this dry and then just stood the pot in the water to hydrate it rather than hydrate it beforehand. So choices. That's my normal zombie moss, spag moss, bees grow, the one I use, basically because I can easily get hold of it. That needs soaking before you use it. I don't even know if I'm going to use that, it's just here in case, basically. Then I've got some small grade bark. This is Orchid bark. I'm going to try a different brand in the not too distant future, but not for the small bark because I've still got loads of that. I don't want to waste it, it's not exactly cheap. And then I've run out of the large grade bark, I've virtually got none left. But this is the medium grade. Now I tend to use the large grade stuff to go in the holy clay pots for things like cattleyas and crocking the bottom of pots so that they're not quite as deep. I'm on to using medium bark for that now because I'm almost out of the large bark, and the little bit I've got left I want to save in case I've got a cattleya to pot up, in which case I'll want it. Because even the medium grade can be a bit tight for some cattleya roots. So that's two types of bark. I've normally got three. That's what the coconut husk looks like when it's dry. That's what the moss looks like when it's dry. I'm sure most of you know that. Yeah, but it does need soaking. And then in addition to that I've got sponge rock, which is giant perlite. This is not far off a bag of dust now. There's not much more that's usable in here, but I still want to use up these larger pieces on the top. It's just there is getting a lot more dust around there. That dust is dangerous, so don't breathe that in. I have got another bag of that, so not to worry. And those two bags were sent as a gift by a viewer from the States, because you can't get that in the EU. You can only get a very small grade of perlite and tiny. You're not allowed to have the big stuff. Don't know why, and yet apparently it's readily available in the States, so somebody sent me a couple of bags. I mean, if you think about the shipping, that weighs nothing. So, you know, that was a brilliant present, that was. And then I've got some charcoal, and again this is got a lot of dust in it. I think the way to get round the dust when I buy the charcoal is to get the bigger bag. Remains to be seen. Again, that's something I've only started using recently. So that's what I've got available to me. What I'm going to use, I haven't actually made my mind up yet, but we'll now have a look at each plant in turn and make the decision based on that. Right, the little Psychopsis had a lot of unviable roots, and there's one I've missed. When a root breaks like that and has got a stringy bit, sometimes trimming it just behind the break will make it shoot out, but that one's gone at the base, so there's no point in keeping that. Now, the rest of these seem reasonable. I won't say good, they seem reasonable. So what I've been left with on this plant is not a very good root system for the size of the plant, but hopefully the new growth will push out some more soon, preferably. But the root system was destined to fail if it had been left, because it was inside. Oh, the sun's gone in. Let me just turn the lights on. I'll be filming in the dark otherwise. You know, the root system would have failed totally if that had been left in that breaking down moss much longer. So the base has had a spray with hydrogen peroxide in case there's any mould or nasties lurking, and that's what we're left with. And I'm going to I'm trying that in the coconut husk, so that will be that. So it's going in that with some perlite and possibly a bit of charcoal. The idea being that it can stay in its pot that it gets this time round as long as possible without repotting. So that's that one. Next. Now that's probably a little bit of a surprise if you can remember yesterday's video. This root system looked like it had totally failed on this Masdevallia. It hasn't. It's actually got some quite good roots. It could do with a few more than that for the size of the plant. But what it's got is enough to get this going again. That is going in moss. Just moss. Loosely packed moss. So that's what that one's going in, and that will go in quite a small pot as well. Right, next, the Sarcochilus. Difficult decision, this one. The roots that are left are viable. They're not bad, and we've got a new one here with a growing tip and one here that looks like it's still growing. It does branch. It is capable of branching, but it likes to grow quite flat. So to get it quite flat in a pot, bordering breaking roots. So it's going to have to go in a reasonable pot. These, from what I can gather, because I really don't know much about these, are probably as close to something like a Phalaenopsis as far as what they like below ground. So they like some air around the roots, not compacted in anything. So I think that's probably going to go in small bark. And probably, well, virtually everything I use apart from pure moss will have charcoal in it, and I might even chuck some charcoal in with the moss. And I've gone off using moss recently. It just goes off too quickly. Right, the little Coelogyne cleaned up quite nicely. Very, very fine root system, and that dictates the media it grows in. Yeah. You put that in a large, chunky, airy mix, chances are the roots will dehydrate. So these roots need to be in contact. So this needs to go in small bark again. It might grow in pure moss. It might grow in the coconut husk. But when this is not in active growth, it likes to be dry. You know, just an amount of moisture, not wet under any circumstances, or the roots will rot, and it can get into the base of the plant as well. So that will just go in bark, small bark, probably with some chunky bark mixed in with it. We'll get to that. And last but not least is the little Miltonia. Very, very fine root system again. Some of these roots are probably dead, but if I start trimming, I'm going to cut good ones. So the whole lot's going in the pot, whether it likes it or not. The only thing that it's not going to get in the pot is the length of the roots. Branching root system. This does them no harm at all. Above every one of these cuts, the root will branch. And sometimes it will push back up that root and branch in several places. It's not a big deal. Now on some plants, every single root is precious. Every single one. And that's normally at the point where you've hardly got any left. You know, if you ended up with 20 roots on a plant and 18 of them were rotten, you're struggling. Right, so let's just a look over the what is going to happen. I've still got to choose pot sizes, and that means getting some pots out here to choose from, and then we'll mix media or not as we go along. So I'll just have a break off for a minute. Right, there's an assortment of pots. So when I got crawled in under the table to my pot store, oh, I'd love to have a big I'd love to have a grow space big enough that there could be a big cupboard with a workbench in front of it, and all my pots and paraphernalia could be shut away behind closed doors out the way, but I haven't. I've got my grow space is for growing orchids in, so all my paraphernalia has to find somewhere else to live. Right, so that conveniently was sat on the top of the pots, and that sparked off a little idea. So I've got a pile of plants here tucked up under the camera. That's that one sorted. Right, now this stuff is renowned, once it gets soaking wet, for staying soaking wet a very long time. These like to stay moist, but they like to be borderline dry in between waterings. So catch-22, if this stuff goes in a pot and gets watered, it'll stay wet for quite a long time. That's not what's wanted. But put it in an open basket and it won't stay wet for that long. So compensation, you know, I want to use this stuff for this plant, but I don't want it staying soggy. So by using an open basket, we get the best of both worlds. We get something that can hold a good bit of moisture, that I'm being told by quite a few people that use this frequently, and a lot of people, well, some people I know have actually virtually switched to this across the board because they're getting such good results with it. The long-term prognosis is yet to be seen in some of those cases, because I'm reasonably well informed that when this stuff breaks down, it goes quick, and if you're not on top of it and catch it, you'll take your roots down. So you've got to keep your eye on it, and it will eventually break down. It's not going to last forever, it's organic, but because of its chunkiness, it does have quite a bit of air around it. So your roots can be airy, but they're still in contact with something that's got moisture in it. So I'm not pressing hard here. If I press hard on these roots, they'll snap. So I'm just tucking in gently. Somebody actually said when I say I'm not pressing down, it looks like I am. This is as gentle as I can be, but the media's still got to get down in the pot. You know, it's got to do its job, but it's done gently, and it's done a little bit at a time, easing it down in. There are some root systems where I would use brute force to get the media in there and pack it in really tight. This is not one of those. If I push too hard against these roots, they will just snap. And then all I can hope is that this decides to push some new roots out. So, how are we looking? The only problem I have got is this plant is not going to stand nice and still. You know, it's not going to be firm in the pot. So I'm just looking for some smaller stuff just to put in there. So I've got a gap, basically, quite a big gap. So I get some smaller stuff in. So I often find the bigger stuff at the bottom of the pot and the smaller stuff towards the top where the new roots will come out. It's better that way up. If you put the smaller stuff in the bottom of the pot and end up with the big stuff at the top of the pot, chances are the bottom of the pot will stay soggy. And we don't want soggy bottoms. So this is, it would not normally take me anywhere near as long as this to pot up a single plant. I'm just going ultra careful, just to make sure these roots are in contact and the plant is reasonably steady. One more little gap just there. So in theory, wherever the roots come out now, if they decide to, they get into some media pretty damn quick. And the root tip won't dry off because it'll be coming in contact with something that's staying moist. Now, with these, there are many people I know, some of them that I know quite well, that have lost every single one that they've tried to repot. And others, smart asses, well, I repotted mine and it took off like a little rocket. Yeah, well, it don't always happen like that. These are notorious for being a bit finicky if you play with their roots. Now obviously the better the root system you start with, the more chance you've got of it being successful. And therein lies the art of growing things like this. Don't let the root system fail. Keep on top of it. Do your repotting, you know, preferably when you can see new roots growing and before the media has broken down. It's chucking it down out there now. Right, so that's the little Psychopsis done. That won't need watering for obvious reasons. Right, so now I've got a puddle in here which I don't want. That stuff really does hold an awful lot of water. Right, I'm now going to do what I will call the bulk of the rest, which is small bark with some chunky bits in it just to put a bit of air in it. And I know I'm going to do more than one plant here, so I'm mixing up a fair bit. Any that's left over will just go in the bag. It's not the end of the world. And that's going to have a bit of perlite in it, not a lot. So I used to dread this stuff. I used to like using it, but it's an absolute algae magnet. And I stopped using it for that reason. And now that I've put my plants, my basic clear pots, inside a black pot, so I'm having to keep my head out of the way because I'm shaking the bag. The last thing I want is that up my nose. Yeah, I think the rest of that can go in the bin. And we'll start a shiny new bag for next time. Or it might be for in a minute. I might need some more in a minute. And all I do with this stuff, because it is the giant stuff, is look for really big pieces and just give them a little break so that they're a bit smaller. You don't need giant pieces in the pot. And that will do for that. Now we get dirty hands again. What's it somebody said? I think Insa said I look like a Devon coal miner. You don't see a lot of those nowadays. I don't think there's any coal comes out of Devon anymore. And lots of counties that used to be renowned for coal mines are just not there anymore. That was quite a nice bit of politics in the day, before I really understood things that were going on. At the end of the day, the unions in this country used to be very strong and very powerful and had very powerful leaders that were cocky. And they thought they could take on governments. And the leader of the coal miners' union took on the government for better pay, better conditions, blah blah blah, shorter hours, blah 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 blah, and sort of won. But the whole country shut down. The country went down to a three-day week because without the coal we couldn't generate our power, our electricity. Shops had to close or open with candles. And there were fuel shortages. It was absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. And after it was all over, the coal mining industry went under. And it now virtually doesn't exist. It wiped it out. So, thank you, Mr. Cocky. You did really well for all your members, didn't you? You lost them their jobs. And the industry's now virtually gone. The coal's still there. Still there, buried under people's houses. But, yeah. Long time ago, that would have been... well, I got caught with that when I was at college, so... That would have been when I was 20. 50 years ago. Something like that. But yeah, at college, you know, we lost power. There was no power for heating. All we had was hot water. You know, not allowed to accommodate people without hot water. But yeah, we lost our heating system. Everybody's sat round in their fur coats, all huddled up together. That was cosy. I did have some bonuses, I seem to remember. Right. So this is just a basic mix, just a basic potting mix. And stuff that's going in there is that. Traditionally, Oncidium type, small pot. Yep, that'll do. Small pot. No need to crock. I've already got some big bits in here. Fine root system equals fine media. Chunky roots, chunky media. that's almost across the board. You could almost say that just sort of do it and you won't be far wrong. There are a few exceptions, but there's not enough to worry about. It's pretty safe. You just look at your root system. You've got a really fine root system that looks like little hairs. Then it's going to want a finer mix. The idea is, this is just hold this theory in your mind, is that the roots need to be in contact with something. They're epiphytes. They would normally be growing on a tree or on a branch, and their roots would attach. They like to be touching stuff. So a big airy mix with a fine root system don't work so good, because a lot of the roots won't be in contact with anything. They'll be in the gaps. A little bit wobbly. You deal with that. You just do. See, now I am pushing down quite hard. Don't forget it's a dry mix, so it's not going to compact as much as you might think. And we'll just put a bit more around the top. Try not to bring your media too close to the top of the pot, or when you water, all your bark will go over the edge of the pot. And you'll use some suitable words to talk about it. Especially if it's all over your kitchen floor. Right, so that's that one. What else is going to go in here? That's going to go in that sort of mix as well. Now this, the new growths on this are at either end. So I'm going to split the plant. Actually, I'll do it with scissors. Split the plant, put them alongside each other with new growths at opposite ends, and now it can go centrally in the pot. It'll still look like one plant, and that's halves the strength of the total plant, but it's provided me with two new plants, two leads. It had two leads anyway, but those two leads will grow on now, and now we need a pot. So I'm going to put that in a bigger pot. I want a wide pot really, don't I? What about that? Yeah, we'll have that one. I wonder what made those marks on that. Oh, it's sticky tape. There was tape around the outside at some point. That was probably me staking, taping stakes to the outside. Right, again, fine root system. I want my two leads as far away from the edge of the pot as possible, so they've got room to grow. Hopefully I'll get two new growths at both ends on this, so you know, it can stay in the pot for 2 years now until it fills the pot up again. The chances are it will do that before the media goes, especially now it's got the charcoal in there as well. It should help slow down the process. Again, I know it's a fine root system, and the person that's worried about me pressing quite hard, I am pressing quite hard now. These fine hairy root systems like this don't actually fail. They don't get crushed and squashed, they put up with it. Quite well, in fact. They do quite well. So you can actually push down quite hard. I'll be back. That needs a stake. Actually it needs two. I'll show you why. Right, I'll show you what I'm up to if it'll work. It normally does. Put a stake down one side, right down to the bottom, make sure it's reasonably firm, and then put another one down the other side. Bear in mind there's two plants butted up against each other here, so put another one down there, like that. And what I was going to say is then you can get a bit of raffia and pull the two together. I'll do it anyway. It's not, strictly speaking, it's not necessary this time round. The stakes are actually doing the job. But as I water, they may come loose. And then what you actually do is so that's just a knot I use that doesn't slip. So once you pull it tight on the stake, it doesn't slide up and down, it stays put. And then what you do is you get your raffia and you pull the top of the two canes together like that, and that puts tension on the stakes against where you put them in the first place, and holds the plant quite tight, and eventually that can come off, and it's not that offensive, you know. Well, these little whitish ones. Right, so we've got room for the plant to move. It's now firm in its pot, and hopefully that will get going. So that's that one done. That leaves a Masdevallia and a Sarcochilus. What am I going to put that Sarcochilus in? Well, while we're thinking about it, the Masdevallia is going in moss, so let's just do that. Am I going to bother putting some charcoal in? I suppose I could do. Might make it last a little bit longer. Possibly, maybe, perhaps. But I want this light and fluffy. This is not getting pressed down. This is a loose, floppy mix around those roots. Hopefully it'll encourage some new ones as well. Right. Starting to get quite a bit of dust now, so we'll have to pack this in. Effectively, the charcoal dust is not a big deal. I mean, it's going to make the moss look awful, but when I water it, it'll just wash out and leave the pieces. So although that looks a right mess, it will sort itself out. Right, how big a pot do we want? That'll do. It's the fact that it's going in moss, these roots should get going reasonably quick. But so they need some room to be able to do that. So I can see a nice hollow right underneath the centre of the plant with a little gap in the roots, so I can fill that little hollow up now before I start putting any more down. And then as it goes down in the pot, that centre piece will not be an air gap. So all I'm doing is making sure I've filled all the areas of the pot, and I'm going to need some more. So I'm not really pressing it down, I'm just helping it into place. My hands are filthy. Never mind. Doesn't matter what you get on your hands, it'll wash off. I remember doing that once. I was out for a walk with somebody and I trod in some dog's muck. It was in the days when people used to just leave it lying around. Of course nowadays we're really civilised with dog muck, aren't we? We carry around little bags and we pick it up. And you see people walking along the street with their 2 or 3 little bags of poo. How nice. I don't have to do that with cats. They go and bury their poo in next door's vegetable plot. Actually they don't. Don't think there's anyone round here growing vegetables anymore. It's not, you know. I used to grow a lot. But not anymore. I've got the space here and quite honestly I haven't got the inkling. You know, I don't want to be out mucking about in the garden in all weathers. I've got enough to do in here with this flipping lot. That'll keep me going. Right, I like to see, I know a lot of people don't agree, I like to see Masdevallias sitting proud of moss, not in it. It's got this horrible feeling because moss holds so much water. You could start encouraging rot by getting it too far up the crown of the plant. So I like to just see the very edge of the plant where the roots come from. Everything from that point can be below ground, but I like to be able to see the base of the plant. Right, so that's that little one done. It's quite firm in its pot, so that'll be alright. That won't need watering for a while. That leaves the Sarcochilus. Let me just rinse my dirty mitts. It's funny with coal, I remember that when I worked as a consultant First time they sent me up north, proper north, not not Hatfield, I mean real north. And I was going up the, would have been the, whatever the motorway is that goes past Sheffield, M6 probably, might have been M1. But anyway, I was heading up north, nice day, so I had the windows down, and I got to a point on the motorway where I got this really, I didn't think it was a very pleasant smell, and the air was thick with it, and I could not work out what it was. I thought it was some sort of chemical factory or something, and then I saw the big wheels in the distance. It was the smell of coal in the air. And I remember being in Wales once when I was very young, going in a pub in the in parts of Wales where the language is still spoken by a lot of people. In the old days the English were frowned on. They probably still are actually, thanks to our politicians. But anyway, I walked in a pub, and as I opened my mouth to order what I wanted, the whole place went quiet, and most of the people were speaking English. They immediately stopped and started speaking Welsh. Rotten people. And the pub stunk of coal. All the people had it on their clothes, it was in their skin, so it had got in the fabric of the building. Everything smelled of coal. They didn't have an easy life, that's for sure. But in some of those Welsh valleys and places like that, if you didn't work in the coal mine, you probably didn't work, full stop. So that's what they had. Now what am I going to put that in? Do you know, I'm inclined to just put that in large bark, with some smaller bark near the top, just for any new roots that come out, and then perhaps just put some live moss sat on the top. Yeah, I'm just going to put it in this mix at the end of the day. These roots are Phalaenopsis like. They look to me like they need air around them, so we'll give that a go. Now they like a wide pot. The only way I can get a wide pot is to have a big pot. Well, you know the answer. If you put some big stuff in the bottom first of all. See, this has already got holes around the side, so it's going to have plenty of air. That's partly why I've chosen this. So we've crocked, so that shouldn't stay soggy down there. That's got loads of air coming in. That's that bit. And then if you want a shallow pot when you haven't really got one, don't plant your pot, your plant too deep. Let the plant sit well down in the pot. Yeah, that way it's shallow. So it's got a wide, flat area to grow in, even though it's a deep pot. It's not going to use it because it's not going to get half a chance. This is still quite a large pot though. Actually, this is going to be mostly the larger stuff. The pot's too big, I think. Is it? Well, it won't be too big if I can get it in deep. Oh, sorry, you know, in and not let it come right up to the top of the pot. And it doesn't matter if some of these higher up roots actually stick out a bit. Excuse the plane. So that's not too deep in there now. It's an airy mix. And what's going to happen when the roots come out? They're going to come out high up, aren't they? No, I'm not happy with that. I really don't know what to do with this flipping thing. What else could I do then? Right, decision made. I'm just have a small bit in the bottom of the pot. I'm going to stand that in the pot, right down there, and just bury the roots. So it's got hardly any media at all. And it can sit down there. There's no way that's going to stay soggy. There's not enough media there. But it's got the media up to the base of the plant. It just looks a bit better. And try that. So say my other two hybrids seem to be growing okay. This one just won't get going. Right, so that's what it's going to get. So that's a relatively small amount of media. It has actually got quite a lot of roots in there, and there's plenty of air. And there isn't really much in there that can hold water. You've got some charcoal in there, some perlite, quite a lot of medium-sized bark and some small bark, help fill in the gaps. And the plant's just sitting on the top. I just need a little bit more around the base. I'm going to end up to the top of the pot soon if I'm not careful, aren't I? That's it. Let's see what happens. I have to aim with that too much already, quite honestly. Right, so that was a look at some pot choices, some media choices, some logic of why. We staked one. That will now need watering because that had a dry mix. All of the ones that went in this mix will now need a good watering. The new bark doesn't hold water. It doesn't wet. The water goes, it changes colour and it goes dark, and then within a couple of days it's dry because it doesn't hold much, it doesn't soak much in until it ages a bit. You know, once it's had sort of 4 or 5 weeks and it starts behaving itself. But at first you've got to watch your watering because you'll probably need to water more frequently for a bit. Because obviously your roots have got to get going and you don't want to be dry. So, right, that's that little session done then. I'm sure I will find some others to do before winter sets in, but the number of plants that need something done is getting very thin on the ground now. I may still come across the odd one, but I need to get some nice new labels done for these. I do actually know what they all are. Do I? I can't remember. Did we have a label in that Oncidium type? Can't remember. Well, it'll be here if I had one. I haven't thrown anything away. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. So that was amusing. I'm standing here poking buttons on my camera, wondering why the hell it won't actually switch on. Well, the answer's there. Battery's charging. They don't work without batteries. Anyway, this is the little lineup. We started with 6, we ended up with 5. That's often the way. And I don't worry when a plant goes like that. Those sort of plants with that sort of rot, it's not even worth trying. Because the chances are, if you can see a piece that looks okay and you cut it off and try and plant it, the chances are some of that rot's in there and it can kick off again. So I'd rather they were just gone when they get like that. It's not a common thing, it doesn't happen all the time, but I've had enough of them to sort of, you know, if you can catch them in time you might be okay, but once they get like that, it's just better, they're better out of it basically. So everybody's got a nice new label. Hopefully everybody's in a media now where they can grow on and have room to do that. This is the only one I'm actually worried about, but it's loads of holes in the pot. I've kept it low in the pot so the media is relatively shallow. Hopefully it'll sort itself out and maybe we'll have a pot full of roots. The little Miltonia, new growth here, so it's got all this pot space to go. That had reasonable roots on it, no reason why that shouldn't get going. The Nitida, whatever you want to call it, this had to be staked. It's now been watered, that'll settle the media in, and I've gone round and trimmed the leaves. There's quite a lot of brown ends to the leaves. Some of the more recent ones are fine, but it was older ones. Brown leaf tips can be a nutrient deficiency. It can also be too much feed, media going off. Combinations of the aforementioned. The Masdevallia hybrid had better roots than we thought in the end, so that's in very loose moss, and I'll wait until I see that moss showing signs of drying before that gets any water. Base of the plant just sitting on the moss, not in it. That's how I like to do them. And then the little Psychopsis is in the cocoa husk. Let's see how it does in that. It should have constant moisture and air. So we'll see how that does. And it will take an amount of time to dry that cocoa husk stuff because it holds so much water, but with an open basket like that it should hurry it on its way, because the idea is to get a wet, almost dry cycle without spending too much time up the wet end of that cycle. So hopefully that will work. So busy afternoon. Yeah, when you do a group like that, you turn around and walk away and feel quite satisfied that you've done something useful, and hopefully they're all going to live in this case. So we'll see how we get on. Thanks for dropping by. See you again next time.